Some men cancel plans and feel relief instead of guilt. They hear dinner with the group and start calculating how to decline without seeming distant. They watch others arrange weekend gatherings and feel no pull to join, not because something happened, not because they're avoiding anyone specific, they just don't want to go. This gets misread constantly. People assume loneliness. Others think it's depression, withdrawal, or some unspoken resentment. The man himself might even wonder if something's wrong with him, because the cultural message is clear. If you're not seeking company, you must be lacking it. But there's a distinction that often gets missed. Some men aren't isolating, they're regulating. The behavior looks the same from the outside. A man who spends most evenings alone, who doesn't initiate social plans, who seems content in his own space doing his own things. But the internal experience can be entirely different depending on what's driving it. Isolation driven by fear feels constrictive. It's a response to threat, real or perceived. The person stays alone because connection feels dangerous, overwhelming, or likely to end in rejection. They want company but can't reach for it. Preference for solitude feels spacious. It's not a reaction against people. It's an orientation toward internal clarity. The man isn't avoiding connection. He's managing his cognitive and emotional resources in a way that works for him. Psychology didn't make this distinction clearly until fairly recently. For a long time, anyone who spent significant time alone was grouped into one clinical category. Either they were introverted, which was treated as something to overcome, or they were lonely, which needed intervention. The idea that someone might actively choose solitude and be psychologically healthy while doing so wasn't given much room. That started to shift. Men who prefer being alone tend to share certain patterns in how they process the world. They notice details others miss. In a conversation, they're tracking tone, hesitation, contradiction. They pick up on what isn't being said as much as what is. This makes interaction more intense for them. A casual chat isn't casual, it's information dense. This creates a specific kind of fatigue, not from lack of social skill. Many of these men can navigate social settings easily when needed. They can read a room, hold a conversation, make people feel comfortable, but doing so requires active processing. They're managing input on multiple levels at once. After a while, it drains them. Time alone isn't emptiness for them, it's recalibration. Their internal world doesn't go quiet when they're by themselves. It organizes. Thoughts that were fragmented during the day start forming coherent structure. Problems that seemed unsolvable suddenly have angles they hadn't seen. The mental noise from external stimulation fades, and what's underneath becomes clear. This is why many men who prefer solitude describe it not as lonely, but as clarifying. They're not withdrawing from life. They're making sense of it. The misunderstanding happens because most people equate connection with presence. If someone isn't physically around others regularly, the assumption is they must be disconnected. But men who prefer being alone often have a different relationship with connection. They don't measure it by frequency. They measure it by depth. A single meaningful conversation can sustain them longer than a week of surface-level interaction. They'd rather have one person they can talk to honestly than a dozen people they have to perform around. Quality doesn't just matter more to them. It's the only thing that registers as real connection. This makes them selective, not closed off. They're not rejecting people as a category. They're filtering for resonance. And when the filtering is tight, most interactions don't make it through. Not because they're bad, but because they're not substantial enough to justify the energy cost. From the outside, this can look like distance, like the man doesn't care about relationships or doesn't know how to maintain them. But internally, he's just operating by different criteria. He's asking whether an interaction will add something meaningful or just create more noise to manage later. There's also the matter of how solitude feels versus how it appears. To the man experiencing it, being alone often feels like alignment, like his thoughts and actions are finally matching. He's not second-guessing himself because there's no one to perform for. He can move through his space at his own pace, think through things without interruption, exist without commentary. To someone watching from outside, it can look like stagnation, like nothing's happening, like he's stuck in a loop of avoidance. This gap in perception creates friction. Family members worry, friends feel pushed away. Partners interpret the preference for alone time as rejection or emotional unavailability. And the man himself may start to wonder if their concern is valid. Maybe something is wrong. Maybe he should want more company than he does. But preference isn't pathology. Some nervous systems are built to handle lower levels of stimulation. Some minds work better with fewer inputs competing for attention. Some people simply function more clearly when they have space to think without external pressure. That's not a problem to fix, it's just how the system runs. What matters isn't whether a man prefers being alone. What matters is whether that preference comes from a place of choice or avoidance. If he can connect when he wants to, if relationships are available to him and he knows how to maintain them, if solitude is something he moves toward rather than hides inside, then it's a preference. He's choosing the conditions that help him function best. If he's alone because connection feels impossible, if every social interaction confirms a belief that he's unwelcome or inadequate, if solitude is the only place that feels safe, then it's something else. Not better or worse, just different, and worth examining. The question isn't about how much time he spends alone, it's about what that time does for him. Does it restore him, or does it reinforce isolation? Does it make the rest of life more manageable, or does it replace the rest of life entirely? Men who prefer being alone in a healthy way don't use solitude as armor. They use it as infrastructure. It's the foundation that makes everything else possible. Without it, they're operating at a deficit. With it, they're clear-headed, present, and able to show up when it matters. The other element that often gets overlooked is agency. Men who genuinely prefer solitude aren't waiting for permission to be social. They're not hoping someone will convince them to join in. They've already evaluated the options and chosen what works for them. They have access to connection. They just don't always want it. This is distinct from men who feel locked out of connection and have reframed that exclusion as preference. The behavior might look similar. Both spend time alone. Both decline invitations. But the internal experience is entirely different. One is choosing, the other is coping. And the man himself usually knows which one it is, even if he doesn't say it out loud. Some men are built to operate this way. They process the world through internal reflection rather than external engagement. They recharge in solitude rather than company. They find clarity in silence rather than conversation. Once the pattern is understood, the behavior no longer needs explanation.